Good afternoon. I'm your host, and welcome to Kenya News Update today. In a stunning international operation, Interpol has announced the arrest of 651 suspects in a massive cybercrime crackdown across Africa. Among those detained are 27 Kenyans, and authorities have recovered a staggering 554.7 million shillings. That's over 4.3 million US dollars. This is one of the largest coordinated actions against digital financial crime on the continent in recent years. The operation, codenamed Jackal, involved law enforcement from multiple nations working in sync for over 6 months. Today, we're going to dive deep into what this means for Kenya's cybersecurity landscape, the global fight against fraud, and the individuals caught in this sweeping net. We'll examine the data, speak to experts on both sides of the debate, and assess the long-term implications. Stay with us for this 12-minute deep dive. Let's start with the hard numbers because they tell a compelling story. Interpol's operation resulted in 651 total arrests across the participating African nations. From that total, 27 of those detained are Kenyan nationals. Now, let's talk about the money. The total value of assets seized, frozen, or recovered stands at 554.7 million shillings. For our international viewers, that converts to approximately 4.3 million US dollars. But here's a critical breakdown within that total. A significant portion, 430,000 US dollars, was intercepted in real time as it was being transferred by the criminals. Furthermore, authorities identified and froze an additional 45 million US dollars in suspicious transactions across more than 2,000 bank accounts linked to the networks. That's money that was prevented from reaching its destination. The operation also led to the identification of over 1,800 suspicious bank accounts and the freezing of 400 of them. In terms of physical evidence, police seized 83 mobile phones, 25 laptops, and 12 SIM boxes, which are devices used to automate fraud schemes. The scale is immense. To understand the context, we need to look at the rising tide of cybercrime targeting Kenya. Over the past 5 years, reports from the Directorate of Criminal Investigations and the Communications Authority of Kenya show a sharp increase in sophisticated online fraud. This includes business email compromise, romance scams, and investment fraud that often target vulnerable populations both domestically and abroad. The Central Bank of Kenya has repeatedly flagged the vulnerability of mobile money systems, like M-Pesa, to social engineering attacks. Just last year, the Kenya Bankers Association reported attempted fraud losses exceeding 20 billion shillings, though actual losses were a fraction of that due to security measures. This Interpol operation, therefore, isn't happening in a vacuum. It's a direct response to a growing, transnational threat that exploits digital financial inclusion for criminal gain. The collaboration signals a new phase in regional law enforcement, moving beyond borders to tackle crime that itself knows no borders. Now, let's hear the perspective from law enforcement and government officials. We spoke with a senior analyst from the Directorate of Criminal Investigations Cybercrime Unit who participated in the operation under condition of anonymity. This was a surgical strike, the analyst told us. For months, we tracked the digital footprints, the money trails, and the communication patterns. These aren't isolated actors. They are networks with facilitators, money mules, and technical experts. The arrest of 27 Kenyans is significant, but it represents the operational layer. The real victory is dismantling the infrastructure, the bank accounts, the devices, the laundering routes. Recovering 554.7 million shillings and freezing 45 million US dollars more strikes at their profitability, which is their core motivation. The government's stance, echoed by Interior Cabinet Secretary Ksh554M in recent statements, is one of zero tolerance. They argue that such operations protect Kenya's growing digital economy and its international reputation. "We cannot be a haven for digital bandits," a ministry spokesperson said. "This action protects millions of honest Kenyans who use digital platforms daily." However, there is another side to this story, one voiced by human rights advocates and legal experts. We reached out to the Kenya Human Rights Commission and several defense attorneys representing some of those arrested. Their concerns center on 3 main points: the scale of arrests, potential for overreach, and the rights of the accused. 651 arrests is an enormous number, says Annette Wanjiku, a lawyer with the Legal Resources Foundation. While we applaud the fight against crime, we must ask, where is the granular evidence for each individual? In such wide-net operations, there is a documented risk of sweeping up low-level money mules or even individuals whose identities were stolen, alongside the alleged masterminds. The principle of individual culpability must be preserved. Furthermore, critics point to the challenge of cross-border evidence sharing. Will Kenyan courts receive full, admissible evidence from Interpol and other countries in a timely manner to ensure fair trials? There's also the question of proportionality. Is seizing a mobile phone from a suspect allegedly used for fraud equivalent to the freezing of a bank account containing millions? The debate is between collective security and individual rights. Let's visualize the scope of this operation with some key comparisons. First, look at the arrest numbers. 651 total arrests across Africa, with 27 Kenyans specifically identified. That means Kenyan nationals constitute approximately 4% of the total detainees. When we compare the monetary recovery, the 554.7 million shillings seized is a direct loss to the criminal enterprises, but the 45 million US dollars frozen represents potential future crime that was prevented. That's a tenfold difference in scale. Consider this: the recovered 554.7 million shillings could pay the annual tuition for over 11,000 university students at a public institution. The frozen 45 million US dollars is equivalent to the combined annual budget of several mid-sized county governments. These figures aren't just statistics. They represent significant economic impact, both taken from crime and shielded from it. Digging deeper into the methodology, Interpol's operation relied on intelligence sharing through its I-24/7 global police communications system. African law enforcement agencies, including Kenya's, contributed data on suspicious transactions, phone numbers, and online personas. The Financial Reporting Center in Kenya played a pivotal role in tracing the flow of illicit funds. The technical seizure list is revealing: 83 mobile phones, 25 laptops, and 12 SIM boxes. SIM boxes are particularly nefarious. They can house hundreds of SIM cards to send bulk phishing messages or impersonate banks, making detection difficult. The seizure of these devices physically disrupts the fraud assembly line. Analysts believe the networks were involved in phishing, sending deceptive messages to steal login credentials, and vishing, voice calls pretending to be from banks or government agencies. The recovered 554.7 million shillings likely represents successful frauds where the money was still in transit or held in intermediary accounts. What does this mean for the average Kenyan? On one hand, there's a clear benefit. Reduced cybercrime means greater security for your mobile wallet, your savings, and your personal data. It bolsters confidence in Kenya's position as a fintech leader. A secure digital space is crucial for economic growth. On the other hand, it raises questions about surveillance and data privacy. To track these criminals, agencies monitor vast amounts of digital communication. Where is the line between legitimate monitoring for security and intrusive surveillance? Data protection advocates warn that without robust legal safeguards, the tools used against criminals could be misused. The Data Protection Act of 2019 is still being tested in this new, high-stakes environment. The public debate is thus bifurcated: relief at a major crackdown, coupled with anxiety about the power required to execute it. Looking ahead, what are the long-term implications? Experts we consulted believe this operation will have a deterrent effect, but only temporarily. Cybercriminal networks are adaptive, says Dr. Silas Mwangi, a cybersecurity lecturer at the University of Nairobi. They will study this operation, learn from the tactics used, and evolve. The key is whether law enforcement can evolve faster. This requires continuous investment in digital forensics, international cooperation, and updating our laws to keep pace with technology. Another implication is diplomatic. Successful joint operations like this strengthen ties between Kenya's agencies and Interpol, as well as with neighboring countries. It builds trust and shared capability. However, it also places pressure on the Kenyan judiciary to handle these complex, transnational cases efficiently. Can our courts process evidence from abroad, often in digital form, while ensuring the rights of the accused? The outcome of these 27 Kenyan cases will be a major test. In our final analysis, the Interpol operation is a landmark event with multifaceted consequences. The sheer scale: 651 arrests, 554.7 million shillings recovered, 45 million US dollars frozen, demonstrates both the severity of the cybercrime threat and the growing capacity to confront it. The involvement of 27 Kenyans highlights that the problem has domestic actors, not just foreign ones. The debate between security and liberty is not academic. It is playing out in real time as these suspects await trial. For the government, it's a victory to showcase. For rights groups, it's a moment for vigilance. For the public, it's a mix of reassurance and a reminder to practice digital hygiene. One thing is certain: the battle for the security of our digital wallets and identities is only intensifying. The Jackal operation is a major battle won, but the war continues. Thank you for joining us for this in-depth report. We've covered the data, the debate, and the future implications of one of Africa's largest cybercrime crackdowns. The story will continue to develop as the legal proceedings against those arrested get underway. We'll be following it closely. For continued coverage of this and all the news that matters to Kenya, remember to subscribe to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host. Stay informed and stay safe.